Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever folks happen to find themselves. My name is Carmen Mazzara, and I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. I'm so glad that all of you can be here for day 2 of our Diversity Forum series aimed at advisors. We really hope this series will help you inspire your students to come join us in the fields of international affairs. And we'll be talking all week long about lots of different aspects of this particular question about how you can be even better advisors than I'm sure you already are for your students. If you haven't had a chance, I'm going to ask my colleague Brianna to put a link to the program in the chat. That will give you full bios on all of our speakers throughout the week, as well as the whole schedule. In particular, I want to flag for you all our session on Friday, where Brianna and I will be talking about what APSIA is and how we can best be of service to all of you. This week of activities and all of the aspects of the Diversity Forum would not be possible without the wonderful team at APSIA, particularly Melina Perez and Brianna Suarez, my colleagues, and especially our sponsors and investors in this event. And in a special way, I want to call out the Harvard Kennedy School, Johns Hopkins SAIS, McLarty Associates, the Open Society Foundations, Princeton University's School of Public and International Affairs, Syracuse Maxwell School, the Texas A&M Bush School, USC's Master of Public Diplomacy program, and the University of Washington Jackson School, who've made special investments in making this week possible. Again, the program is in the chat. We will also be able to record this session and have it available on the APSIA YouTube page later. And with that, I'm going to get out of the way and turn the floor over for what I know is going to be a great conversation, moderated by my colleague, Calvin Hayes. So Calvin, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Calvin Hayes. I'm a 2010 graduate of Florida A&M University and a 2013 graduate of American University, where I completed my graduate studies. It gives me great honor, and it's honestly a privilege to welcome you to such a dynamic panel discussion titled Challenging the Narrative About What Counts and Empowering Your Students to Tell Their Story. Today, we have an all-star lineup of individuals who will share some useful tips, some practical advice of information that you can use when dealing with your students on a day-to-day basis as they tackle those international internships, graduate school admissions, and job opportunities that are out there. First up, we have Mr. Ariel Matos. Mr. Matos is the Associate Director of Graduate Admissions at Princeton University School of Public and International Affairs. We have Zach Przystup. He's the Senior Program Officer of the Fulbright program at the U.S. Department of State. And we also have Sara Toubiana. And Sara is the Global Recruitment Partner at Open Society Foundations. Obviously, the purpose of this particular event today is to give you the tools, the advice, the guidance that you can share with some of your students as they apply for these programs. As a graduate of Florida A&M University, I know what it's like to attend a minority serving institution. And I know how important it is to have a strong village of advisors who are committed to my success. Back in my day, there was a song titled, "You've Got to Give the People What They Want." It was a song titled by the OJs. It was one of my favorite songs. And we know that when it comes to applying for programs in any nature, you have to know what is necessary. And so to kick things off, I'll start with Sara. We're going to specifically talk about what counts when putting together a winning application. Specifically, what are some of the things that students think that don't count, but actually do count? And I would encourage each of you to drop some questions in the chat box. If you feel so inclined, turn on your video, but be sure to remain on mute. And what we'll do is we'll start with Sara, then we'll go to Ariel, and then we'll go to Zach. We'll go ahead and get it started. What counts when putting together a winning application?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me join you. This is really exciting. I thought it'd be helpful just to quickly say what we do at OSF, because a lot of people probably aren't so familiar with us. We are the largest human rights foundation in the world. So we fund social justice and human rights causes in more than 120 countries. But we kind of stay under the radar, so a lot of people don't really know about us, and we kind of let our grantees take the spotlight. So, but in terms of what counts, so we like to see what makes somebody unique, and we realize that not everybody has the same access to opportunities that can help build up their resume. You know, we know there are a lot of people who have the luxury of taking unpaid internships during college, or spending time abroad, but there are also a lot of others for whatever reason, they have to work wherever they can throughout college and pay their bills, and there are really valuable skills that come from those types of experiences. So we hire a lot of people to do operations and help getting our grants out the door to our grantee partners. A lot of people do logistics. And so the skills particularly that someone can gain from the service sector, we find really pretty relevant. So whether it's like retail or working in like a server at a restaurant, or I think like now it's particularly relevant, but working like as a contact tracer or doing vaccine coordination, things like that. Those skills might be overlooked, but like we think that they're really relevant to highlight for a lot of different types of roles at our organization.
Okay, I'm happy to jump in here. Hello, everyone. My name is Ariel Matos, and I am the Associate Director of Graduate Admissions at the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. But before all of that, I'm a first-generation college graduate, right? I was one of the first in my family to earn my bachelor's degree, then went on to get my master's degree. And I'm a public servant. I'm a community servant at heart. That's what I have a passion to do. I'm very passionate about those students who come from a very similar background as I did. And who showed that tenacity, that leadership, that grit to get to where it is that they currently are. So that's exactly one of the things that we certainly look forward to at the Princeton School. We like to see students who have exhibited that ability to overcome challenges, that ability to lead organizations, to lead people. A student's commitment to public service, that really is one of the driving factors that we look forward to in every applicant at the Princeton School, as we are a public policy development school. Right? So those are all things that we like to see. So what I encourage students to do when they're completing their applications, when they're writing those essays, is to really realistically tell your story. You know better than anyone all the things that you have gone through, all of the things that you have overcome to get to the point where you presently are. Those things matter for us, right? We like to see students who were able to learn something in a classroom and then apply it into real life. We like to see students who, maybe had to put in extra hours in order to perform well within a math class, or who, in spite of having to work 2 part-time jobs to support themselves and their families, they were still able to do well academically in school. Right? So those things that you may not think are important, for graduate schools, they may be very valuable. At the Princeton School, again, we certainly would like to hear about those stories of your tenacity, of your grit, of your ability to overcome challenges. Again, definitely write that into your story. Don't be afraid of being who it is that you are, of showing who you are in that application process, because realistically, that is what will set you apart from the next applicant. So just to really quickly talk about the Princeton School, we are located in Princeton, New Jersey. We are one of 42 graduate programs at the larger Princeton University. We have a small, tight-knit community. Generally, every year, we will bring in about 100 students across our 3 graduate programs, which will include a 2-year MPA program, a 2-year MPP program, which is for mid-career professionals, and then lastly, a traditional PhD program. So we're always looking for great students. We're great partners with the APSIA organization. So if you have any questions about the Princeton School, I'm certainly more than happy to take those later on in today's conversation.
And hello, everyone, and good afternoon. I think Sara and Ariel really took the words out of my mouth, so I'll try to add a little bit to what they already said. I think something that Ariel said that stuck out is really tell your story. That's what we want to hear at Fulbright. We want to hear your story. One really important aspect, one important thing I'd like to dispel is any myth that the Fulbright program is for a certain segment of the United States. It's only for modern day Indiana Jones who has a a running list of countries they visited, and speak 3 languages. That's just not the case at all. The Fulbright program is for everyone. The worst thing that can happen is if your students count themselves out, because this program is for them. Now, here's where you come in. In order to have a successful application, they need to tell their story. Again, it doesn't have to be about some exotic international experience they had. It can be about, you know, some insight they gleaned, either working in the service sector, riding the bus to school or work every day, about a family move they had. It can about going to college for the first time, first in their family. It can be any of those things. And what they need your help with is drawing out those experiences, honing in on them, and telling a really effective story. Ultimately, that's what's going to make their application really compelling. And I just want to highlight that they do need you for this, because 90% of applicants to Fulbright work with a Fulbright program advisor or a faculty member to put their application together. And we found that those who apply through institutions are, on the whole, much more successful than people who apply at large. So they need you to guide them through the process, just like 90% of applicants need that help. So certainly your help will be helpful to them too.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing a lot of is this overriding theme: tell your story. How does a student tell their story when they may come from a untraditional background? They may have not had so much experience in the study abroad space. They haven't learned a lot of foreign languages. Say, for example, they come from a service sector background. What are some ways that you've seen candidates successfully put together an application that marketed some of those skills that were applicable for your program? And I'll remind everyone who's a participant today, feel free to use the chat box if you have any questions. We'll start with Ariel for that question.
Sure. So what I would encourage students to do is, in telling their story and discussing their opportunities to overcome challenges and to display that tenacity and grit, to make sure that they're really focusing on that process of achieving, right? You know, there are times in which we will read essays or statements from students who really focus on a struggle, right? And a majority of the essay, a majority of that statement is 85% centered on the struggle, and there isn't enough told about what they learned from that struggle, how it is that they overcame that struggle, right? So we really want to hear, like, we want to learn about the struggle, but more so we want to see about how the student sort of engaged with it, learned from it, overcame it, and ultimately became a better person because of it, right? So whatever that struggle might be, again, if there is a student who had to work 2 jobs in order to support their family, that is honorable. If there is a student who saw a particular area of need within their community, specifically during the COVID period, where there may have been a need for assistance with residents scheduling vaccine appointments, or they needed a ride to a vaccine appointment, or they simply needed someone to spread the word about the vaccine, right? We like to see how students are identifying the challenges that they come across, how they're identifying how they overcame those challenges, and ultimately ways in which they started to help build community around those things, right? So whatever, I'm not going to say that there is one particular, area that is more important than another. For the student, it is completely up to them to decide, which impact area has had the greatest influence over their trajectory and over their lives. But whatever that is, lean into it, right? If it is something that you glean from, that you learn from, right, we definitely want to hear about it throughout your personal statement and throughout your application.
Zach, would you like to pick up there from where Ariel left off?
Absolutely. I think for Fulbright, one important part about telling your story, Fulbright, right, is a State Department's flagship international exchange program, which sends Americans abroad. It also sends foreign students to the US, but that's another story. We're talking about American students here. So what we like to see is, in an application, a student who's really reflected on who they are, what's made them who they are, their story. Again, what's their story? And then someone who embraces the cultural ambassador aspect of Fulbright. So when they're abroad, they're going to be sharing American culture, values, beliefs, ideas. They're going to be exchanging those ideas. So we want someone in a compelling application to tell the story of who they are and to tie that into how they will present themselves and their American story abroad, and then how they'll bring that experience abroad back home to their communities. So really how they will tie together who they are with their experience in that country, and then bring that experience back home. That's what makes a really compelling story and application for us.
And Sarah, what about you? Have you seen any great specific examples of a student that may have not had a lot of international experience, but they marketed their skills really well?
Yeah, I was trying to think of specific examples. One came to mind about it was a cover letter about a woman who worked as a waitress, and how that kind of prepared her unconventionally for the role that she was applying for. And she linked what, like, the skills that she had gained from that experience directly to the qualifications for the role, like multitasking, prioritizing, teamwork, people skills, things like that, you know, it wasn't necessarily a direct link, but she was able to, like, make the case for herself. And yeah, I mean, just like, again, like what both Ariel and Zach have mentioned, but being authentic. I think I appreciated the article that Carmen had sent over about people who felt the need to sell their trauma and their pain, and that's not at all what we're looking for. We want it to be authentic. We want people to share what makes them who they are, but again, it should be genuine. And we want to know that the people who are applying for these roles can identify with the populations that we're serving. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's really just like how their lived experiences can help, show us the type of perspective that they'll bring to our organization.
I believe Zach wanted to weigh in.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah, you reminded me of something I wanted to mention. So thanks for jogging my memory. You might be wondering, how can someone talk about what they would do abroad if they've never had an experience like that? Well, we encourage students to really think about a time they felt foreign. And this should be pretty easy for them, because there's always a time where you feel foreign or like an outsider, whether it's in college, whether it's your first job, whether it's meeting a new group of friends, or someone from a country or a culture you never met before. And thinking about a time where you felt out of place. Because when you go abroad, you'll probably feel that again. So how did you adapt to that situation? What did you learn from it? Going back to what we mentioned about the service sector side of things, I think that sector is incredible for building two critical skills for any job, and that will help you to thrive in any job. That is relationship building skills and communication skills. That is the core of any job, I believe, that students will have in the future. In a service sector job, you're meeting lots of people, some friendly, some not. You get to deal with them. You learn to deal with ordinary people. You learn to deal with wonderful people. But you learn those communication and relationship building skills. So those translate directly to going abroad when you're building relationships with someone from a country you've never been to, who speaks a language you've never heard. How do you still communicate? How do you still build a relationship? Those are critical and inherent in service sector jobs. So that's all I wanted to add to that. Thanks.
I think those are all wonderful points. I heard the theme of being authentic. I really appreciate that. And speaking of that, we had an awesome question come into the chat box. Big shout out to Bethune-Cookman University representing for the Florida HBCUs. I think that's where this particular question came from. And he talks about, his question is, what about how the story is being told? Writing skills. Have you ever seen candidates out there that you can see that they have a wonderful story on paper, but there may be some issues with the writing style and the way it's conveyed? What are your top tips when it comes to the writing process of students actually telling their story?
I'm happy to jump in here. I was an English major in college, so I am a bit of a stickler for writing skills when I'm reading statements and essays and policy memos and things of that nature. At the Princeton School, we are a graduate level school. We understand that when students are admitted into our program, there's going to be a lot of writing. They're going to have to write policy memos. They're going to have to write lengthy papers, so we are going to pay attention to the writing skills that a student exhibits on that application process. So the writing skills absolutely do matter. I would certainly encourage students to write their essays with enough time so that they can proofread and edit them as necessary so that they have an opportunity to share those essays with their trusted advisors. Get another set of eyes on it, but I do discourage students from having 8 and 10 people proofread their essays, because the more people who proofread your essays, the less that student's voice is that will actually remain within that essay. Again, we want students to tell their stories, but we want them to tell them in a way in which we can follow along, right? So we want students to, yes, again, absolutely, to use proper grammar, proper nouns, proper verbiage, understand into which organization you are applying into, understand which degree you're applying into. If you're applying into the Princeton School and you're looking to apply into the MPA program, but you call us by a different program, you will notice that. If you spell our name wrong, you will certainly notice that. Right? So just be mindful of those very small things that can sort of serve as demerits on your application, because we are certainly paying attention to those things. We understand that applying into graduate school, applying into the Fulbright program, it is an investment in your time and also in your resources, right? Make sure that you're investing your time, your resources, and your full attention when you're when you are completing, and also before submitting those applications, because we will be paying attention to those things.
I can jump in quickly. It depends on the role you're applying for. If you're applying for a communications role, obviously your writing skills have to be really top notch. Either way, we look at, we want to make sure that somebody has a clear and concise and persuasive argument. The language itself, if you're a non-native English speaker, we won't hold that against you. It's something that we've been pretty conscious of, but just generally speaking, as long as the writing is clear and concise and we're able to follow it, then that's really what matters most to us.
I will say that the writing is important. Like Ariel said, you want proper nouns, you want verbs and subjects and objects to be where they should be. It doesn't have to be a literary masterpiece. If you can follow the story and it's told concisely and it's told well, that's great. If we can, from reading the application, reading the essay, if the skills, the identity, the values, the beliefs of that person come through, that's a successful application. But the writing is important. It has to be presented well. And again, that's where all of you come in. You're all uniquely positioned and qualified to help guide an essay from the conception stage through drafts to a final form. So that's where your students will really depend and rely on your help to usher this project along.
And we really do appreciate the question about writing and how important it is to the application process. But we also know that writing is just one piece of the application process, regardless of the program. Obviously, we are living during a different time, during the era of COVID-19, which means that some of our community service activities and leadership responsibilities look a little bit different during this phase. Could you talk a little bit more about how students can position themselves to have a competitive application while some of these leadership activities and community service activities are done in a virtual format? I would imagine that those activities will probably look a lot different than how they were looked at many years before. Ariel, you can kick us off if you would like.
Sure. So even during times of COVID, when there are lockdowns just about across the world, right? Communities still need people to rise up and get things done, right? So whatever that looks like for you and within your community, there are always going to be opportunities to get involved, to get engaged, to do something to support someone, whether it's your parents or your neighbor or an entire community, right? There are always ways for students, for applicants to be creative about how they go about serving and developing those necessary leadership skills, right? So don't think that those opportunities are not available. Again, whatever things it is that you and your students may be doing during this time to help support and continue to build community, we want to hear about those things in the application process. You know, I think that for graduate schools, many of us during the pandemic, we have really reevaluated the way in which we review our applications for admissibility across our MPP program, the mid-career program, and also the PhD program. At the Princeton School, we have gone GRE optional, right? For the students who are applying into the 2-year master's program at the Princeton School, we still do require the GRE. However, we're taking a holistic review approach to those applications, right? It's not the only data point that we're looking at within the application, right? Because we understand that certain students are being challenged in very different ways. The GRE over the last year has been offered in a very different format. You know, it's not very often now that people are going into a large testing space in order to take the GRE. A lot of people are taking the GRE virtually directly at home. And we understand that for some students, they may not have a quiet space where they can focus 3 or 4 hours to complete the GRE, right? So we certainly take that into consideration, right? And for the student, again, it is going to be imperative for them to be able to tell that story, right? If they were trapped, I shouldn't say trapped, but if they were in a less than ideal space when they were completing the GRE because of pandemic restrictions, right? We want to know about that because, you know, for us, that can be an additional data point, an additional factor that we consider when we're looking at the holistic view of that applicant. So again, even during times of COVID, there are ways to serve, but just understand that we understand. We have an understanding of the challenges that are out there for all of our applicants, for all of our students. And again, we continue to look for ways in which students are being creative and students are being advocates for their community and also in terms of serving as change makers.
And Zach, what about you for your particular program? I know that the Fulbright program is really competitive and generally in the past, students may have been able to do things that were in person, but that application process or package might look a little bit different this year.
Sure. I think for Fulbright, you know, we also understand that options were limited for people, right? The Fulbright program itself went virtual for a time, and some aspects of it are still virtual. So we understand options were limited. What we want to know more is what people did with what they had. Can't change the circumstances, but what did you do with the time that you had? Like Ariel said, were you active? If you couldn't get out in the community, did you read 100 books during this time on topics X, Y, and Z that you were curious to learn about? If you couldn't get out because you were looking after a vulnerable family member, tell us about that experience. It must have been frustrating. It must have been challenging. What did you learn from it? Any experience can really count as long as it's packaged in a compelling story. And there's no shortage of compelling stories from any student because everyone is an experiment of one. Everyone has unique stories. So I think mostly what Fulbright would want to see is how did you use the time that you had? What did you do with it? And Fulbrighters are, you know, they're typically adventurous, curious, open-minded, and those are the kind of things that are going to come out of an application. Even during these limited virtual times, I think there's still ways where those traits, those attributes can be shown just by virtue of how people spent their time.
Sarah, would you like to pick up from where Zach left off there?
Yeah, sure. Can you all hear me? I know there was trouble. Okay, great. So yeah, I completely agree with what both of you just said. What did you do with your time? Did you use it maybe you started a blog or something to write about whatever, topics interest you, just to show your interest and knowledge of specific subjects. But I mean, in terms of the virtual aspect of it, I mean, I think being able to work virtually is a skill in and of itself. And it's something that at OSF we've done, even pre-COVID, all of our teams are global. So we've always had to utilize like the virtual space for meetings and collaboration and things like that. So if you're able to do that efficiently, that's a huge skill. If you're, it shows that you're self-motivated, you're disciplined, you're able to communicate and collaborate effectively, you're good at time management. Yeah, I mean, just like comfort using any of those video platforms or project management platforms, things like that for class projects or whatever it is, that those skills are really useful for a lot of our jobs, pretty much all of our jobs.
Awesome. And let's just take it a step further, specifically for the advisors that are on the Zoom session today. Would you have any advice for the advisors out there in ways they could be creative and innovative and, different topics that they could address as they do their own virtual sessions, whether they be in a group or kind of one-on-one with their students to prepare them for the upcoming application process for some of your programs? Zach, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Sure, I think there are a couple of resources that I would want to point you to, because I mentioned that you all have such a big role to play in helping your students with their applications to Fulbright, to other programs as well, grad school, jobs, internships, whatever it may be. But in the case of Fulbright, you have a big role to play, and we understand that, and we want to also support you in that. And so there are ways that we do actively support faculty, staff, and Fulbright program advisors to do that. And I'll tell you a couple of them right now. So one is directing your students to the campus or area Fulbright program advisor. We can help you identify them if you reach out. Again, these program advisors play a huge role in the application process and helping usher applications from start to finish. So Fulbright program advisors, that's one. Alumni ambassadors, that's two. We can also set up for students, individual or a group, a Zoom or virtual meeting with Fulbright alumni ambassadors. These are Fulbright alums who are willing to both advise on the application process and just also do a meet and greet. Who are you? What are you interested in? Let's have an informational interview. Let's chat. So number two is alumni ambassadors. And number three is we have over 40 webinars a year on the Fulbright program and application process from A to Z. You can attend or have students attend free of charge. So these are open to everyone. If you have any questions about how to do that, I'm going to drop my email address here. Please reach out to me directly because we can point you in the right direction. I think using the resources that we do have is probably the best way I can think of to bring out the creativity in each individual applicant.
And Sarah, would you like to pick up there?
Yeah, I think I may have missed the initial question. What was it? There was screaming outside that distracted me.
Yeah, no problem at all. We're basically going in the direction and talking about what tools and resources that advisors could use in their individual sessions or group sessions with students. Is there anything that you would recommend as they put together their own virtual programming to prepare students for some of these competitive programs?
Yeah, I mean, it might be a little bit different in our case. I mean, but I think it's mostly just kind of being aware of the types of roles that we recruit for, that, what we do at OSF, seeing what kind of skills are needed to be built up for them, whether it's, writing, research, operations, things like that. I'm happy to connect with anyone if they have any questions about anything. you can feel free to give my email address. But if anyone has any questions, I'm always happy to be a resource.
Wonderful. And Ariel, do you have any examples of maybe some universities out there or advisors who have done some great virtual programming with their students during this time to prepare themselves for maybe your particular program or other programs out there?
Sure, absolutely. I would highly encourage advisors to reach out to our teams, whether at Princeton or any other academic institution. Now we recently completed our admission cycle for the academic year. So now we are really beginning to craft our recruiting calendars for the coming academic year. So what that means for us is that we have some time available. If an advisor knows of a few students who are interested in a Princeton school and they simply want to hear directly from an admissions counselor or a member of the team, please, I highly encourage you to reach out to us and let us know. We'll be more than happy to schedule an individual Zoom with you and with your students to really talk about our programs. I'm the type of admissions professional where I'm going to be straight. Like I'm just gonna be honest with you about what it is that we're looking for, what it is that applicants can do in order to strengthen their candidacy for admission into our programs. I just feel like just being honest and transparent about the process is what is most beneficial for students. And I'm very happy to do that. Again, like me being where I am today really is because of the work that other people in my community have, the time and support that they've invested in me to help me to get to where I presently am. And I kind of feel like it's my responsibility to do the same for the next generation of students. So if anyone wants to connect with me about the application process, what our school is looking for, tips and tricks that students can do to help strengthen and improve their applications, what type of community service or public service are we looking for at Princeton School, I'm more than happy to help do that. Just feel free to reach out to us. A lot of times the students may lack the confidence, to reach out to an admissions professional, but you as advisors, I would encourage you to really take upon, if you have the capacity to do so, to take upon that responsibility and to sort of bridge that gap for your students, to help them along with the process.
Ariel, I actually want to pick up where you left off there. You talked a bit about confidence. And we know that it all starts with being confident enough to put together that application package, maybe picking up a phone call and calling an admissions counselor to learn more about the process. And it speaks to this larger degree of the imposter syndrome, not feeling like you are enough. What are ways do you think students can start to change their own narrative to recognize that they are enough for some of your programs when, let's just be honest, they may look on, the website, or maybe they don't have those personal connections with maybe a student that comes from a tough background, but they see, students out there that have more experience than them. What is your solid advice to the advisor that's looking that student in the eye who doesn't feel like they are enough, but they really do have some special skills?
Sure. Listen, for the advisors who are on the call, the first thing I would encourage you to do is to try your absolute best to dispel any myths that your students may believe about themselves. Again, as a first generation college student, I can't tell you how many times. So I'm originally from the city of Trenton, New Jersey, which is a minority community where in my local high school, more than 50% of the students dropped out of high school. Just it's not such a great community where I grew up, but I was able to make it through again because I had some advisors, much like yourselves, who really saw something in me and invested in me, who encouraged me and pushed me forward. Unfortunately, there are so many students out there who are told at a young age that they're not good at math, that they're not good test takers, and that is a myth. It's a critical myth that far too many of our students are believing. And what happens is that they just give up. They give up before they even give themselves the opportunity to do well. So the first thing I would tell you is, encourage your students that to not believe the myth, to not believe that hype, that they're not good test takers, that they're not good at math, or that people of particular communities don't travel or don't like to swim. Right? Because all of those things are sort of handicaps that we place upon ourselves because someone somewhere along the way told us, and unfortunately we decided to believe it. as an advisor, I would encourage you as a trusted voice to please try to dispel those myths as much as possible. Encourage your students to take those challenging classes, encourage your students to give themselves a chance to take the GRE or to take the LSAT or the GMAT, whatever it is it's going to take for them to get into the next level of graduate school or to get into another career. Encourage them, encourage them, encourage them. Just know that they have you in their corner, that you support them, that you believe in them, and that there are resources available. One of the great things about our school and our school's holistic admissions review process is that we don't compare one student to another. We read every student individually and holistically on its own unique merits, right? So if you went to a school that didn't offer, upper level calculus classes, we can't penalize you for not taking those types of classes, right? We can only review you based on what opportunities you had available to you. I would encourage you to advise your students to challenge themselves, take those courses that are going to be necessary for them to move forward. If you know that they want to go to public policy school, they're going to have to take some quantitative coursework. That's public policy is founded on the ability to analyze, to interpret data sets, right? So understand what it is that they're going to need in order to make it to that next step. Advise them on making sure that they at least have some level of engagement, some kind of floor with that material. And then again, whenever and however and if ever necessary, connect with those schools that those students are planning to apply into, right? It can certainly make a huge difference, not only for the student, but also for the entire community there at the school, right? Because we feel like if a student from Florida A&M is able to get into Princeton, then what happens when they go back to that school and they tell the people, the underclassmen, I just got into Princeton, that's going to create waves and ripples for them. The students are going to say, if he could do it, then I could do it too. What did he do to get there, right? And as advisors, you guys have that such amazing opportunity to be able to do that. So I would encourage you to lean into it, even during these times of COVID. Schedule those virtual meetings, whatever you got to do to connect with your students. I can guarantee you it will make a huge difference, not only in them today, but also in their future professional and academic trajectory.
Ariel, that was absolutely perfect. Thank you so very much for sharing those pieces of advice. It's important for you to encourage your students to have confidence and to take on the challenge. But I saw Zach ping here, so I'm going to give the floor to Zach.
Thank you. What Ariel said is really stuck out to me. Mentorship. The importance of mentors in this process when applying to any competitive program or field is just critical. I think all of us on this call have had a mentor in life who's opened a door for us that we didn't know could open, who's shown us something that we didn't know was possible. And that's all of you. Too often we hear, if my mom or dad told me something, I'd say, oh yeah, that's great. You think I can do it? Well, of course, you're my mom and my dad. Sometimes you need that third party to come in and say the same thing, and that actually resonates more. So you all are in just such a critical position in the role that you can play for your students. I want to highlight one other thing because it's so important. What I said earlier, don't want to sound like a broken record, but Fulbright is looking for your students. So one way to give them confidence is simply to assure them, hey, you don't think this program is for you? Actually, I was just on a webinar. A representative of the program assured me they're looking for you. They want you to apply. One of the key missions of Fulbright is to represent the diversity of US society abroad. We can't do that if we're not representing the diversity of the US in our application process, in our selections. We are quite literally looking for your students, and we need them to apply. I'm going to share just in the tab a video actually about why you should apply, why students from all backgrounds should apply to Fulbright. Please take a look at it. It's only a minute. It's a pretty good video. Share it with your students. Thanks.
You both articulated that so perfectly. But yeah, I mean, I would just say the imposter syndrome is real, and dispel the myths. I mean, encourage your students to go after opportunities. We're open-minded in the types of people that we hire. So, we really believe that everybody has value to bring, no matter who they are. And Zach reminded me I should probably give a plug because we actually have paid internship opportunities for exactly, for people who come from marginalized backgrounds who might not have access to opportunities. And so, yeah, I mean, they're paid 10 to 12 week opportunities. We should be opening up the recruitment for the fall very soon. So yeah, look out for that.
Wonderful. We look forward to checking that out. I'll remind everyone in the audience, if there are other questions out there that you have, feel free to drop them in the chat box and I'll be sure to acknowledge them. But I do want to pick up where we left off with the last question. One of you mentioned the ripple effect that happens when one student from an institution is awarded a particular fellowship or gets accepted into a graduate school. As I've mentioned before, I've been in the Foreign Service now for about 9 years, but my path to the Foreign Service was through the Rangel Fellowship. And I would not have known about the Rangel Fellowship if it wasn't for, a few graduates from my institution that had received that fellowship. They were products of my community. They dealt with some of the same struggles that I dealt with. They may have not been able to attend graduate school or even undergrad if it weren't for some type of assistance. They came from single parent homes. They came from communities that may have not had many resources. But guess what? I followed their path. I asked them for their advice. And now, since I've graduated, probably about 4 or 5 other students in the last 7 years who have now gone on to graduate school and got the Rangel, the Pickering, or the Rangel Pickering Fellowship or the Fulbright. And I think those stories are so important because the things that you're pouring into your students right now might be important for 10 years from now. But I want to talk a little bit more about what are some of the other myths that are out there? What are some of the myths that you've had to bat down? Maybe, in order to get into your organization or to your school, you need a certain GPA or be a part of this organization or travel abroad to this particular place. Are there any myths out there that you've found surprising that you've had to bat down in the past?
I can go just quickly. Is that one myth is that we only accepted Ivy League students, and that was something that was going on for a long time, but is completely false. We've definitely, we're doing our best to dispel that, and specifically looking at like CUNYs and schools, just not Ivy Leagues. But that was, that's, I think, a myth that was being circulated for a long time that's completely false.
Ariel, what about you or Zach? Anybody want to hop in?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in there. And it's weird, like thinking about the misconceptions that prospective students may have about Princeton. And I think about my own academic journey, and I can see how when I was younger, I believed those same myths and those same misconceptions, right? I can't tell you how many students I've spoken to over Zoom who've said that, I never felt like I belonged at Princeton, or I never felt like I was good enough to get into Princeton, or I never felt like I could afford a Princeton education. And for me, it's difficult to hear, but I understand where it comes from, right? And if I could help to dispel those myths, starting with affordability for Princeton, just know that every student who is admitted into one of our graduate programs is going to receive a full tuition offer. We fully fund each of our students, and students would also be eligible for a generous living stipend. So if you can get into Princeton, which isn't an easy feat, I'll admit that. But if you can get in, we got you. Like we'll fully cover the cost of your tuition. We'll provide a generous living stipend. If you need additional academic support, you need some tutoring to make it through, like we'll do everything that we can to support you. That's one of the benefits of having a smaller community at Princeton. We can really focus on the growth and the development of each and every one of our students. So we really do invest and value the growth and development of each of our students at Princeton. In terms of students of color not getting into Princeton, that is another myth that I would like to debunk, right? Over the last 2 years, a majority of our incoming MPA students have been domestic students of color. And when I say domestic, I mean students who are from the continental US. So we really value diversity, equity, and inclusion at Princeton. We understand that in order to make an indelible impact within our world, we need to have a cohort of policymakers who are representative of the different communities that we find within our world, right? And how else do we do that than by admitting students from those very communities, right? So we are looking for students who are going to bring ethnic, racial diversity into our campus, political diversity, gender diversity, diversity of ability, and also diversity of thought within our schools, right? So we are really looking for students from all colors, all races, all backgrounds, all schools of thought to come to Princeton, who will ultimately then go on and continue to shape not only this country, but also the entire world, because we do have a large contingency of international students also at the Princeton School. Right. So the myth about not being able to afford Princeton isn't true. The myth about students of color not getting into Princeton isn't true. Now, the myth about it being impossible to get into Princeton, I mean, there might be, like, it's not impossible. It is a little difficult to get into Princeton, but that's why as advisors, it's important for you to connect your students with us so that we can get to know them. Right. At Princeton, you don't need to have a perfect 4.0 and a perfect GRE score to gain admission. Right. But what you do need to have specific to our program is you need to have evidence of your commitment to public service, because we are a public policy development school. We want to, we admit students deliberately who have that evidence of them doing community-centered work, because we believe that once they become policymakers, they're going to continue to invest their time and their resources within that community. Right. So that's one of the things that we do look for. Again, you don't need to have that perfect GRE score, but we do, because we have a lot of quantitative coursework within our academic core. We do want to make sure that students are going to be able to successfully navigate that quantitative coursework. So again, these are all things that we can certainly advise students on, but I can promise you that they will never get admitted if they never apply. That's the first part. Like, if a student already says, you know what, I'm not going to get in, and they just don't apply, they will never know. Another thing, one of the things that I really value about our team is that if a student applies and, they're not offered admission at this particular time, and they want feedback so that they can consider reapplying later on, we do provide that feedback. Right. So just encourage them, if they really want a Princeton education, if they're thinking about graduate school, it starts with the application process, the belief that they can get in. And then, from there, like, who knows what can happen next.
And like you said earlier, all it takes is one. And then there are those knock-on effects. One gets in, wow. Goes back to the community, the city they're from, wow. Maybe not everyone will get into Princeton, but maybe they'll start applying to other schools that they never even thought of, and they'll get into those. And then those have knock-on effects. So it just is a virtuous circle. I think two myths with Fulbright, people see it as, it's a flagship international exchange program of the State Department. Boy, I better have some international experience. I don't speak languages, haven't been abroad. Count me out. Fulbright, more often than not, you don't need a passport already to do a Fulbright. It's often the reason you get a passport for the first time. So you don't need any international experience. In fact, many, I don't know the percentage, a whole bunch of people do not who get a Fulbright. So that's one myth. Two is that there's a GPA cutoff. There's no GPA cutoff. Not everyone has to have a 4.0. Someone can have a 3.0, a 2.7, compelling personal experiences that have shaped them and why they want to do this program. And that is often enough to get you in the door. So those are two quick myths I'd like to also dispel, or try to.
Well, thank you to each of you for debunking some of those myths out there. I think those were wonderful answers, and I think that our advisors can go back and arm their students with that good information so that they won't be afraid to apply. As we wrap things up, our session is coming to a close. I've had so much fun talking with each of you today. There is going to be a survey. And so if you take a look at the chat box, if you have some time, I would encourage you to fill out some of the questions that are here. But also I would encourage you to follow up with the participants and the panelists that so graciously agreed to follow up with you if you have any outstanding questions. And then for our advisors out there, I would also recommend that you stay tuned for the upcoming Wednesday sessions, advising students about graduate school and the open share conversation among advisors. We heard a lot of great information out there today in our panel discussion, but more than anything, your students will miss 100% of the shots that they do not take. Continue to do the great work that you're doing to make sure that your students can walk up to the door, but also get through the door, because their experiences matter, their backgrounds matter, and they are enough. And it takes a village, and you're a part of that village. And we thank you so much for being a part of this discussion today. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our panelists and reach out to APSIA as well. Thank you so much. That concludes our panel for today. Thank you.